My night in the ghost town, first-person encounters with the paranormal. The sun was setting as I arrived at the outskirts of the ghost town. Its once vibrant buildings were now nothing more than decaying relics, standing as silent witnesses to a time long past. The wind whistled through the empty streets, carrying with it the faint echoes of laughter and cries that once filled the air. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the night ahead, and stepped into the town. As a paranormal investigator, I had visited numerous haunted locations, but there was something different about this town. It was as if the very air was charged with an unseen energy, a lingering sense of despair that clung to the deserted buildings. I set up my equipment in the town square, the heart of the ghost town, and prepared myself for the long night ahead. As darkness fell, the town took on a more sinister demeanor. The moon cast long, eerie shadows that danced across the deserted streets, and an unsettling silence enveloped the town. I could feel a chill creeping up my spine, but I brushed it off as the natural fear of the unknown. My first encounter with the paranormal occurred just as the clock struck midnight. I was exploring the town's abandoned church when I heard the faint tolling of a bell. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The church bell was rusted and covered in a thick layer of dust, untouched for years. Yet I had clearly heard it toll, its mournful sound echoing through the silence of the night. Shaking off the fear, I continued my investigation. I ventured deeper into the church, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw it, a fleeting shadow disappearing into the darkness. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. A sudden drop in temperature made me shiver, and I could see my breath fogging up in the cold air. As I stepped out of the church, I felt a sudden gust of wind. It was as if the town itself was breathing, its ghostly inhabitants stirring in the darkness. I could hear whispers carried by the wind, indistinct voices that seemed to be calling my name. The rest of the night was a blur of unexplained phenomena. I saw spectral figures wandering the streets, their ghostly forms flickering in the moonlight. I heard the laughter of a child echoing through the silence, a sound that sent chills down my spine. My equipment started to malfunction, the readings fluctuating wildly. The climax of my night in the ghost town came when I found myself face to face with the apparition of a woman. She was dressed in Victorian clothing, her spectral form glowing in the darkness. She seemed to be in distress, her ghostly hands reaching out to me. She repeated a cryptic message, her voice echoing in my mind. The fear was overwhelming, but I knew I had to stay strong. I tried to communicate with her, to understand her message, but the more I tried, the more intense the paranormal activities became. I felt an unseen presence closing in on me, its malevolent energy threatening to consume me. As the first rays of dawn pierced the darkness, the paranormal activity started to subside. The spectral figures disappeared, and the whispers faded away. I was left alone in the ghost town, the silence more unsettling than the ghostly encounters. As I packed up my equipment, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I knew I had survived the night, but the ghost town and its spectral inhabitants had left a lasting impression on me. I left the town with more questions than answers, the cryptic message of the ghostly woman echoing in my mind. As I drove away, I looked back at the ghost town one last time. In the light of day, it seemed almost peaceful, its haunted past hidden behind the facade of decaying buildings. But I knew better. I had spent a night in the ghost town and had the chilling encounters to prove it. As I drove away from the ghost town, the sun began to rise, casting long shadows across the deserted streets. The town seemed almost peaceful in the early morning light, a stark contrast to the nightmarish experiences I had just endured. But the chilling encounters of the night were still fresh in my mind, the spectral figures and disembodied voices a haunting reminder of the town's haunted past. I reached my hotel just as the city was waking up. The normalcy of the bustling city felt alien after the eerie silence of the ghost town. I locked myself in my room, the safety of the familiar surroundings a welcome relief. But even as I tried to rest, the events of the night replayed in my mind, the ghostly woman's cryptic message echoing in my ears. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of my experiences. I reviewed the recordings I had made, the fluctuating readings on my equipment a testament to the paranormal activities I had witnessed. But the more I tried to find logical explanations, the more I was drawn into the mystery of the ghost town. The ghostly woman's message became an obsession. I spent hours researching the history of the town, trying to find any clues that could help me decipher her words. I discovered that the town had been abandoned overnight, its inhabitants disappearing without a trace. The only clue was a diary entry from the town's pastor mentioning a woman in distress. Could the ghostly woman be the same woman mentioned in the diary? Was her message a plea for help or a warning? The more I delved into the mystery, the more questions I had. But I was determined to find the answers, to give a voice to the silent specters of the ghost town. As I continued my investigation, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I could still hear the child's laughter, the tolling of the church bell, the whispers in the wind. The ghost town had left its mark on me, its spectral inhabitants a constant presence in my mind. My night in the ghost town was just the beginning. I knew I had to go back, to face the ghosts of the past and uncover the truth. The town's spectral inhabitants were waiting, their stories untold, their secrets hidden in the shadows. And so, I prepared myself for another night in the ghost town, armed with my equipment and a resolve to uncover the truth. The ghost town and its spectral inhabitants were waiting, their chilling encounters a haunting reminder of the town's haunted past. As I stepped into the ghost town, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint echoes of the past. The spectral figures appeared, their ghostly forms flickering in the moonlight. The ghostly woman was there, her spectral form glowing in the darkness. I knew I was stepping into the unknown, venturing into a world where the living and the dead coexisted. But I was ready. I had survived a night in the ghost town, and I was prepared to do it again. The ghost town's secrets were waiting to be uncovered, and I was determined to bring them to light. As I returned to the ghost town, the sun was setting, casting long shadows that danced across the deserted streets. The wind whistled through the empty buildings, carrying with it the faint echoes of the past. I could feel the energy of the town changing as darkness fell, the spectral inhabitants stirring in anticipation. I set up my equipment in the town square, the same place where I had first encountered the paranormal phenomena. The air was colder than I remembered, a chill that seemed to seep into my bones. I could feel the unseen presence of the spectral inhabitants, their ghostly eyes watching me from the shadows. As the clock struck midnight, the paranormal activities began. I saw the spectral figures wandering the streets, their ghostly forms flickering in the moonlight. I heard the child's laughter echoing through the silence, a sound that sent chills down my spine. The church bell tolled, its mournful sound a haunting reminder of the town's haunted past. But this time, I was prepared. I reached out to the spectral inhabitants, trying to communicate with them. I asked them about their past, their stories, their secrets. The air grew colder, and I could feel the spectral inhabitants closing in on me. But I held my ground, determined to uncover the truth. The ghostly woman appeared before me, her spectral form glowing in the darkness. She repeated her cryptic message, her voice echoing in my mind. I tried to decipher her words, to understand her message, but the more I tried, the more intense the paranormal activities became. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned around to see the ghostly woman standing behind me. Her spectral eyes bore into mine, and I could feel her desperation, her need to be understood. I reached out to her, my hand passing through her spectral form. But I could feel her energy, her presence stronger than ever. I asked her about her message, about her distress. She looked at me, her spectral eyes filled with sorrow. She pointed towards the church, her ghostly form fading away. I followed her direction, my heart pounding in my chest. As I entered the church, I felt a surge of energy. The air was charged with an unseen presence, a force that seemed to be pulling me towards the altar. I saw a spectral figure kneeling before the altar, its form flickering in the spectral light. I approached the figure, my fear replaced by a sense of determination. I knew I was close to uncovering the truth, to understanding the ghostly woman's message. The spectral figure turned to look at me, its ghostly eyes filled with sorrow, and then it spoke. The spectral figure before me was a man, dressed in the attire of a pastor. His ghostly eyes bore into mine, filled with a sorrow that seemed to echo through the centuries. He spoke in a voice that was barely more than a whisper, his words echoing through the silence of the church. "I am the pastor of this town," he said, his spectral form flickering in the dim light. "I failed them. I failed her." His words sent a chill down my spine. I remembered the diary entry I had found, the mention of a woman in distress. Could this be the same woman? The ghostly woman who had been trying to communicate with me? "I couldn't save her," the spectral pastor continued, his voice filled with regret. "She was accused of witchcraft. They wouldn't listen to reason. They took her life." The pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The ghostly woman was a victim of a witch trial, her life taken away due to fear and superstition. Her cryptic message was a plea for help, a plea for justice. I asked the spectral pastor about the ghostly woman's message. He looked at me, his ghostly eyes filled with sorrow. "She wants to be remembered. She wants her story to be told. She wants justice." I knew what I had to do. I had to tell her story, to bring her justice. I had to uncover the truth about the ghost town, to give a voice to its spectral inhabitants. As I left the church, the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the deserted streets. The spectral figures were fading away, their ghostly forms disappearing in the light. But their stories, their secrets, were now a part of me. I returned to the city, my mind filled with the haunting encounters of the ghost town. I shared my experiences, told the stories of the spectral inhabitants. The ghostly woman's message was finally heard, her story finally told. My night in the ghost town was a chilling encounter with the paranormal, a journey into the unknown. But it was also a journey of discovery, of understanding. I had faced my fears, uncovered the truth, and given a voice to the silent specters of the ghost town. And though I left the ghost town behind, I carried its stories with me. The haunting encounters a reminder of the town's haunted past. The ghost town and its spectral inhabitants were no longer forgotten, their stories echoing through the ages.